Hi, my name is Sydney Butler, and for the AP Lang Senior Project, I created a photo essay on the effects of the coronavirus in Westfield, New Jersey. At the end of January, the first case of the coronavirus was diagnosed in the United States. At this point, the coronavirus was considered an epidemic, which only affects one country. However, as time progressed and it spread throughout the world, the coronavirus was considered a global pandemic. This is similar to the Red Scare in the 1900s. As the coronavirus numbers skyrocketed, people became very fearful. Everyone was rushing to the grocery stores and they were buying things like toilet paper and paper towels and a lot of food and a lot of drinks. So people were very fearful for not only their lives, but the lives of their loved ones. In my photo essay, I chose to emulate some of Robert Frank's photos. Robert Frank was an American photographer who created a photo essay called The Americans in 1958. He captured the post-World War environment in the United States, and in my photo essay, I decided that I wanted to try to recreate some of his photos since the time in the 1900s, the post-World War II, was similar to now the coronavirus. The feelings and the tone and the overall environment are very similar. For my project, I created an Apple book with several photos, including flowers, letter balloons, and signs that brought people hope. I used several filters to set the mood and make a more of a gloomy tone, while the flowers had more of an uplifting tone and brought more cheerful thoughts to people. I also used Photoshop to edit out some of the mistakes, and I used some editing apps to change the clarity and the saturation of each of the photos. Throughout my photo essay, there's a compilation of black and white photos and color photos, which change the mood and really emulate the thoughts and feelings that were going through people's minds during the coronavirus pandemic.
In the early stages of my senior project, I decided to include props in my photos. Instead of just taking pictures of empty streets and balloons, I wanted to add an extra challenge for myself. These props follow a theme of distorting or framing an image to make the product appear different than the original photo. The first prop that I used was a reflective glass ball. When the glass ball is held up against an image, the image is distorted. It is flipped upside down and appears a little different than the original intended image. This is representative of how the media can distort the severity of the pandemic. Many people across the country have not been taking the pandemic as seriously as they should, and that is partially due to the media's coverage. Another prop that I used in my senior project was a frame. When an image is framed, it can actually omit key details in the photo. Sometimes when there was no context, this can actually change the message of the original photo. In this photo, you can see that the frame is held up against a bench outside of Banana Republic in downtown Westfield. I took this picture because inside the frame, the bench is empty, which symbolizes that people are taking social distancing seriously and they're very worried about their health. However, outside of the image, the viewers can't see that there were people behind me. People really weren't taking the pandemic as seriously as they should have, and there were still large groups of people downtown without masks. The last collection of props that I used for my photo essay was PPE, which is protective equipment that healthcare workers use to treat patients with COVID-19 and to prevent them from getting sick. So these included hand sanitizer, gloves, and masks. Before the pandemic, it was very common to see candy wrappers and napkins and water bottles lying outside of downtown Westfield. However, after the pandemic started, it was more common to see things like gloves and hand sanitizer and masks. While most people would think that having to stay inside all day and not being able to do your daily routine would decrease the amount of pollution, I actually found that it was the opposite. While there has been a shift in what type of pollution was outside, there was still a lot of pollution and it's very dangerous to the environment.
So for my final product, I decided to create a photo book. I used Apple's website to create this book, and it is comprised of about 60 photos of Westfield's experience during the pandemic. Now, this book is a photo essay, not a photo diary, and there's definitely a distinction between the two. A photo essay focuses more on a community's experience with a hardship, while a photo diary actually focuses on someone's personal experience. I thought it was important to not only capture my own experience, but to capture Westfield experience. So that's why I decided to create a photo essay, not a photo diary.
As I've said before, these are some of the pictures that I think best represent the pandemic. This first image is of a dirt heart that was made by someone walking by. I think that this is interesting because while there are a lot of hardships and a lot of death surrounding the pandemic, there are also small little positive things that keep people optimistic and hopeful about the future. This picture of the flowers is also important to look at. The flowers I used were a symbol of positivity and hope during the pandemic, but these flowers I took a picture of are actually dying. This is important because while you can look on the bright side of the pandemic and kind of shield yourself from some of the hardships and the harsh realities, it's really impossible to shield yourself from all of the negative things that are going on. This last picture is the picture that I decided to end my photo essay with. It is important to end on a positive note because while there are many hardships and our entire world is going through a very hard time, it is important to know that the community stands behind everyone. These are some of Robert Frank's images that I thought would be important to capture during our pandemic. This next image that Robert Frank took is of an empty road. This situation is not uncommon to the pandemic because many people are trying to stay socially distanced and they don't really have a need to go out and use their cars, so it's very easy to take a picture of an empty road without any people or cars. This last image is of a woman working in a diner. The image that I took is also of a woman working in a diner, but there is definitely one key difference. She is wearing a mask. This is definitely true to the pandemic because unlike before where you could just go outside and do your daily routine, now you have to walk outside wearing a mask.
Overall, for my senior project, I aimed at capturing the pandemic and its effect on Westfield. It is important to note that there are two sides to the pandemic. There are both positives and negatives. While taking my pictures, I found that there were more positives than negatives, and I think that is true to Westfield's environment and where we're located. We're not located near any really close hospitals, and we're definitely not a big city. So for us, it may be harder to spot some of the hardships unless you look on the news. But in our immediate community, there are definitely more positives, and it's much easier to shield yourself from some of the harsh realities of the pandemic. Throughout my essay, I thought that it would be important to include several props that distorted the image and made it out to seem what it was not originally intended to be. I think that this is definitely true to the pandemic today because in the media, they can definitely distort some of the harsh realities and the severity of the pandemic, and that definitely plays a role in how people are not taking the pandemic necessarily as seriously as they should have. Some obstacles that I had to work through during my senior project were the time constraints. So I really was only able to work during the day because that's when the sun is out and it's much easier to take nice quality pictures when there's good lighting. The other time constraint that I had was that since we're in the middle of a pandemic, the shipping is not necessarily reliable. So I had to make sure that my photo book was ordered on time. So I had to make sure that I had the right amount of pictures and the quality of pictures that I wanted for my photo essay a little bit before most people had to complete their senior projects. Although there were some obstacles and struggles, I did have some small victories in my project. So during this project, I actually was able to learn how to use Photoshop. At the beginning, I definitely was a little bit scared of using Photoshop, just because that's a tool that many professionals use when editing their pictures, and it definitely can get a little complicated. So I tried to keep it simple and only use a couple of the tools, and I definitely think that that enhanced my knowledge of photography and editing, as well as how to capture a pandemic and how to change the mood of certain images. While it's hard to talk about the pandemic and about the hardships that people face, it is really important to reminisce and to capture this time. We are living during such an unprecedented time that we have not lived through before, so it is important to capture that for future generations to reflect on and hopefully not repeat the same mistakes that we made. Overall, I think that the senior project was very successful. I learned a lot about photography and editing and how to change the moods of pictures and how to capture a global pandemic. And I think that's really interesting because that's not an experience that everyone can live through. That's something that's very special to our generation, especially because it's our senior year and we are missing out of a lot of things that past years have not missed out on. But I think that it's important to look at the positives and to know that I learned a really cool skill that not many people have, and I learned how to edit pictures, and hopefully I'll be able to use those important skills later in life. Thank you.